Odyssey, video game fun, computer keyboard challenge. More than 40 games in all. Odyssey, the excitement of a game, the mind of a computer. All for the price of an ordinary video game. Odyssey.
Hi everyone, I'm Tyler, and welcome to another episode of Player One Start. Today we're going to talk about the Magnavox Odyssey 2. The story of this console begins with the original Magnavox Odyssey. The first console had a number of removable circuit boards that switched between the built-in games. With the Odyssey 2, each game could be a completely unique experience, with its own background graphics, foreground graphics, gameplay, scoring, and music. The potential was enormous, as an unlimited number of games could be individually purchased. A player could purchase a library of video games tailored to his or her own interest. The earliest documentation on the Magnavox Odyssey 2 was in January 17th of 1977, when the company president claimed that his company will have a microprocessor-based game console on the market in 1977, probably by the Christmas season. Later that summer, John Helms, the video game engineering group leader at Magnavox in Fort Wayne, visited Sanders Associates. Among other things, Helms was there to secure Sanders and Ralph Baer's assistance with the Intel microprocessor TV game console. The project would later become known as the Odyssey 2. Just over a year later, after collaborating with Ralph Baer on the console, the company announced that they expected that the FCC would approve the console in July and planned to announce the system's availability, plus 8 game cartridges later that month. The expected retail price was listed at $179. It wouldn't be until December of 1978 when the Magnavox Odyssey 2, or the Philips G7000, would launch in Europe during the Christmas season. Around 7,500 units were sold before the launch was canceled due to a defect in the power plug. The G7000 successfully relaunched later in 1979. In January of 1979, the Magnavox Odyssey 2 officially made its debut in the United States at the Winter Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. It would go on sale the following month in February of 1979. Unlike any other system at the time, the Odyssey 2 included a full alphanumeric keyboard, which was to be used for educational games, selecting options, or programming. The Odyssey 2 used the standard joystick design of the 1970s and early 1980s. The big difference between the earliest releases of this console were that the controllers were removable. One of the strongest sales points of the system was its speech synthesis unit, which was released as an add-on for speech, music, and sound effects enhancement. However, its graphics and a few color choices compared to its biggest competitors at the time were considered some of its weakest points. The console sold moderately well in the United States. It was one of 3 primary consoles prior to mid-1982, though a third distant after the Atari 2600 and the Mattel Intellivision. Though in 1983, over 1 million Odyssey 2 units were sold in the US alone. To sell this system to would-be customers on its technical abilities, it was sold as a computer-based console. All games produced by Magnavox Philips ended with an exclamation point. No third-party game appeared on the Odyssey 2 in the United States until iMagic's Demon Attack in 1983. The lack of third-party support kept the number of new games very limited, but the success of the Philips VideoPack G7000 overseas led 2 other companies to produce games for it. Parker Brothers released Popeye, Frogger, Cubert, and Super Cobra, while iMagic also released Atlantis. In Europe, the Odyssey 2 sold much better than in the United States. The console is most widely known as the Philips VideoPack G7000, or just the VideoPack. A rare model of this console included a built-in black and white monitor. VideoPack game cartridges are mostly compatible with the American Odyssey 2 units, although some games have color differences, and a few are completely incompatible, such as Frogger on the European console and Chess on the American console. A number of additional games were released in Europe that never came out in the US. Sadly, this console, along with all the other consoles released prior to 1983, were casualties of the Great Video Game Crash in 1983. Ironically, in October of 1984, the US Patent and Trademark Office finally got around to issuing trademark patents to Magnavox for the Odyssey 2 logo, only a few months after Magnavox officially ended sales for the Odyssey 2. So the Magnavox Odyssey 2 had a little bit of a rocky history. It was intended to come out much earlier than it did, almost by a full year. In its early stages, Ralph Baer, the original inventor of the first home video game console, however, circumstances led to him being pretty much cut out of the project. But anyway, now that we've had a look at some of the history, let's go ahead and take a look at the hardware itself. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the console. This is one of the few video game systems that actually have the original box too. This box just screams late 1970s design. And you can see the words, "The Ultimate Computer Video Game System by Magnavox" scrolled across the bottom. I have to say that this futuristic design is what kind of drew me to this console to begin with, and I'm sure that would have been the case in 1979. Well, as I open up the box, you can see that it's not entirely complete in box. However, this did come with a whole bunch of games. So this is what the game cartridges look like. Has a little metal protector there at the bottom. It's very nice to keep the pin contacts clean. Alright, after I got all those out, now I gotta try to unravel everything here. This is the original RF out cord. I'll have to replace this because I don't have the conversion box. And it came with the original power adapter. However, as you can see there, the power adapter cord is spliced, so I'll definitely have to fix that. And there is no corner of this box left unwritten on. I mean, they went all out in designing this box, and I think this is something that I really like about it. My box is not in perfect condition, but it's better than nothing. I also like the techno color across the back. Here are the joysticks. They are very similar to the Atari 2600, with the action button and the joystick in the middle. Mine is actually missing a piece. There's supposed to be a little plastic piece where the metal pieces are. And here is the console. I have to say, the fact that this thing has its own keyboard built in would have been really huge, because otherwise your only other option for a PC at the time would have been mostly the Apple II. And here is the cartridge port. Let's go ahead and flip this over to the back. And here you can see it has kind of these hex-bolted screws in the back, so I actually had to look for one of these attachments. Once I found it though, I was able to put it in my screwdriver and go to town on removing this. It's actually very easy to remove, as there's only 3 screws that keep the back on. And then the back plate just lifts right off. Then there's only 2 more of those screws holding down the logic board. Now once you unscrew it though, the logic board still will not want to come out on its own. And that's because of all the cables that are holding the board in. So despite that, I was still able to get my camera all the way in there so I can take a look at that logic board. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the tech specs of this console. So the Magnavox Odyssey 2 uses its own 8048 processor that runs at 1.79 MHz. It has 128 bytes of static RAM, but it also has 64 bytes of internal RAM in the processor. The Odyssey 2 also uses its own audio-video chip. This chip is capable of producing a 160 by 200 pixel resolution, and that's approximated here in this image. It uses a 16 color palette. Sprites can use only 8 of these colors though, and this is the PAL region, as I was not able to find the NTSC version. 4 8x8 single color sprites can be used, however each sprite's color can be set independently, as in this example. All graphics are generated from 64 characters that are stored directly within the ROM BIOS chip. No other graphics can be created. The graphics chip also allows you to group characters into quads, and this is how some of the images are produced on the screen. The background is generated as a 9x8 grid in either dots, lines, or solid blocks. This can be clearly seen in the game Golf. And this here is an example of how sprites are created based on these characters. The restriction to just this 64 character set was a huge restriction to game developers, and this contributed to the lack of third-party support for this console. Alright, getting back to my RF out issue, I have replaced the RF connector that leads to a conversion box with a standard RCA video cable. Now the other end of this has to be an RF signal, so you can put it into a cable style or coaxial cable style jack. And these are easy to find. These are very cheap off of like Amazon or eBay. But you cannot use this cord with a regular composite jack, as it will not work. Now that I have that replaced, I can go ahead and start putting the console back together. And one more issue to fix is the damaged power cable. I went ahead and ran my hand along the entire cord so I can check for other breaks, and it turned out that there was only one splice at the end of the wire where the power cable was exposed. So I just wrapped that up with a little bit of electrical tape, It doesn't look pretty, but it does the job. And overall, this console didn't really need a lot of cleaning, so that's all the work I needed to do to this console. So the hardware of the Magnavox Odyssey 2 is very unique, especially in the fact that it has its own keyboard. At this point, you can say that it was almost trying too much to be a computer rather than a dedicated games console. However, with the limited resources in this console, although not uncommon at the time, it didn't really have the resources to be almost either one. So with that said, I'm actually going to look at this in two different ways. I'm going to look at one of the programs that show the function as a computer, and then I'm going to show you some of the programs that function as games. Alright, and so here's the moment of truth if my fix to the cable actually worked. So I went ahead and plugged the power cable into the console. And now I'm going to plug it into the wall, or in this case the power strip. Alright, so far no sparks, that's a good sign. And here's the first game I'm going to try out. This is called Keyboard Creation. It's not really much of a game, but it actually shows off some of the computer capability of this console. Alright, let's go ahead and press the power button and see if my little fix worked. Alright, we got a screen. That's definitely a good sign. Alright, so I'm going to have to reference the manual here so I can see exactly what to do. And I'm going to go ahead and try typing in a sample message here. You notice every time I press a letter, the number goes down. The number represents how many characters I can type in at a time. With only 128 bytes of video RAM, there's not really much I can type in. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the clock. And this runs on military time, so this is going to be 2 p.m., 1400 hours. Alright, the next thing that it tells me to do is to go ahead and play my message. Now I gotta tell you, even though this looks very simplistic today, this would have been amazing to do in 1979. I actually would have liked to use something like this when I was still making films on VHS. Think about what other computers were out at the time. You really only had the Apple II. Yeah, the TRS-80 came out around this time as well, but it was more expensive than the Magnavox Odyssey 2, so I would have been thrilled to have something like this back in the day. I'm actually kind of thrilled that I have it now. After reading the manual further, I found out that I could put a message in with the time, such as the date. So I put today's date, even though this isn't when I published the video, this is when I filmed it. And then when I start my message, it'll cycle between the time and the date. I later found out that option 6 will allow me to change the background color. And in the manual it actually shows a lot of suggested uses. The first one was like for creating titles for your VHS tapes. And if you haven't noticed yet, I decided to take their suggestion and use them for titles for my video. I also like how it shows how you can make your own business commercials. This was obviously intended for more than just the home market. So overall, I found this program very intriguing and enjoyable, and something I probably would have had a lot of fun doing back in the early 1980s. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the games for this console. Alright, the first game I'm going to try out is Casino Slot Machine. Yeah, that's about right. Alright, let's move on to the next one. This game is one of the many combination carts that were sold for the Magnavox Odyssey 2. This one is called Math-A-Magic. And because I don't want to think too hard at this, I'm going to go ahead and put this at the easiest difficulty setting. And it is insanely easy. Let's go ahead and get one wrong on purpose so you can see what it... Yeah. Alright, let's try a different game. Alright, now this one requires a bit more thought. Let's try this problem. One issue I had is that when you type in the answer, you actually have to type it in backwards. So I just went ahead and typed in enough characters to where it reset it. Then I gotta type it in backwards, and yeah, I got it right. Alright, another game. And again, I'm gonna go easy. And this is kind of reverse addition, so you basically have to figure out through subtraction. Let's go ahead and do a different one. Huh, I only get addition or multiplication. And we'll start at number 1. So in this game, all it does is it just keeps changing one of the numbers, and then you have to figure out what the next number is. So it's not really too difficult, and in fact, it's really... Right, and this is Echo. This is the other game that's on the same cartridge. And this game plays very similar to a game like Simon. So basically it plays a pattern and you have to repeat it on your next turn. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead and show you how far I got. This could have been a nod to Ralph Baer because he invented Simon. Anyway, let's go ahead and choose a different game. This is golf. And I had to reference the manual on this because knowing where the ball is going to go after you line up your player is kind of difficult unless you have this guide. And even with this guide, I still had some trouble with it. So I'll just go ahead and show you what it was like for me playing this game. Alright, now thankfully I'm not going to have you watch the entire thing in real time, but this is 14 shots into it and I still hadn't made it to the green. And I will point out that the character moves extremely slowly when he's trying to walk, so if you do miss, it's a hard time trying to get him back in the right position. I feel like that if I got used to this game, it'd probably become easier, but since I didn't have the patience for it now, I decided to go ahead and move on. And that's 21 on a par 4. Alright, now this is Cosmic Conflict, and this may remind you of a game like Star Wars Arcade. And I didn't get off to a very good start, so I figured out that it actually uses the left controller, when most other games start off with you using the right controller. So I was able to move the controller up and down, but it wasn't without great difficulty. And so I kept getting ships running into me. Eventually I decided to go ahead and try to take this controller apart and see if there was a problem with it. Luckily it only has Phillips head screws on the back, so it wasn't too difficult to disassemble. Now here's the logic board, and it looks like that they only kept the connector in with some sort of masking tape. And it looks like this has become loose. Either that or the joystick has come loose on the bottom of it. And after doing some research, I found out this is a common problem with some of these controllers, so without swapping it, I had to move on to a different game. Alright, this is one of the most popular games on the console. This is KC Munchkin. And this is a standard, typical Pac-Man style game. One thing I like that's different than Pac-Man is that the dots actually move around and the maze changes a little bit. So it adds an extra layer of challenge that I don't think Pac-Man provides. It's not hard to find this game anymore, however it was pulled from store shelves before the Magnavox Odyssey 2 was discontinued. And this game is Pickaxe Pete. In this game, the player controls a miner, and he starts off in the middle of the screen with a pickaxe. There are 3 doors from which boulders come out and bounce down the mine shafts. Every time Pete destroys one of these, he gains 3 points. However, the axe wears out after a while and disappears. So if Pete has no axe, the player can either jump over the boulders, giving him 1 point, or get to the bottom of the mine and can retrieve a new axe, getting 5 points. If Pete collects a key, he can enter one of the doors, which lead him into the next level. Alright, so what are my thoughts on the Magnavox Odyssey 2? First, I really enjoy this console on a nostalgic level. It is the only console that I have that really makes me feel like I'm interacting with an 8-bit computer, at least one of the first ones out there. The functionality of this console really reminds me of an early 8-bit computer more than a game console. However, the fact that it can play games too kind of served both purposes. The only thing I can dock this console for in terms of games is that it really didn't have that many. Most of the games produced for this console, believe it or not, were often credited to the same person. It was a really small group of people at Magnavox that developed most of the games for this console. And with almost no third-party support for this console, they really didn't get a lot of extra games for it. As an early 8-bit computer, I found this console endlessly fascinating. I really like the fact that I could program things into the console in machine language. I really do see myself taking the time to actually go through and kind of learn some of the functions and try to program my own game. It definitely would have fascinated me in the late 1970s. As a games console, it ranks in kind of average. The only thing that I can dock this console for is the fact that you can only use the pre-programmed characters to make graphics. That's why if you were to rank it solely on graphics, it would come in dead last. And that in itself is probably the reason why not very many people made games for this console. Another side note to this console is the character of K.C. Munchkin. Now when you saw me playing this game and you thought, this game looks oddly familiar, there were some executives at the time that thought the same exact thing. And they sued Magnavox for copyright infringement. So overall, why do I think this console failed? I think it might have been trying to do too much, and it didn't do one of those things well enough for it to stand out above the rest. I mean, if you think about the Mattel Intellivision and the Atari 2600 battling back and forth, and the ColecoVision, which was offering almost true home arcade ports for the first time, the Magnavox Odyssey 2 really can't keep up when compared with those other consoles. So do I think the Magnavox Odyssey 2 is worth collecting today? Well, I would say if you're an avid game collector, this is something you probably should get. It's definitely fun to play with. It didn't take that much to get it going. For the average gamer, I would say no. There are definitely other consoles of the era that are more worth your time. If you're a hardcore collector, yeah, this is one you should probably get. And really just because it's the first sequel to the original game console. This game console also marks the last entry from Magnavox into the video games market. And just like so many of its competitors at the time, this company also left the video game industry due to the video game crash in 1983. So if you are going to collect this console, just be wary and don't spend too much for it. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the Magnavox Odyssey 2? Have you guys played one? Let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments. I'd really like to see what you guys think. Alright, well that's going to wrap it up for this video. Remember, if you like what you see, please hit that like and subscribe button, share with a friend. Remember, you can reach out to me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned because I have more content coming. I'll see you guys next time. Alright, well I really hope you guys enjoyed this video as I enjoyed making it for you. If you guys like to see some of the other videos I've already done, please click on one of the suggestions that should be showing up somewhere over in this direction. And if you'd like to be notified when I post new content, please click on that subscribe button. It'd really help me out. Alright, and back by popular demand, I have another video game joke for you. What do you get when you strap a stick of dynamite onto Sonic the Hedgehog? Sonic Boom. Huh? No? Yeah, whatever. They can't all be gems.